What's going on, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Loop Podcast. And today we're going to be giving our full review and thoughts of Alton Towers Scarefest 2019. Quick disclaimer before we get into today's show: any views expressed by myself or any guests of the Loop Podcast doesn't necessarily represent us. Thank you very much for listening, and let's begin.
Welcome to the Loop Podcast, not your typical theme park podcast. Please welcome your host, Jack Fletcher.
So let's begin. Basically, before I get into today's podcast, I would just like to say I messed up massively. Basically, I had permission to record audio inside the mazes via the hosts on the attractions at the day, and I had a little Rode mic that plugs into my iPhone to enhance the audio, and I used that. I decided it would be a good idea to put it in my backpack, but with the microphone hanging out of it, and you know where this is going, don't you? I lost it. So basically I come out of the maze to pre-check the audio, see if I'd recorded it and everything was okay. As I get out of the maze, the microphone's nowhere to be seen. So I'm in the process of contacting Alton Towers at the moment to try and retrieve the expensive microphone that I seem to have lost in the attic, the new incarnation scare maze of Terror of the Towers. But hey-ho, I've managed to record some backups just in case, but the quality may not be as good as, you know, the microphone that I originally intended on using. So I'm just going to give a brief rundown of the scare mazes that we have this year at the Alton Towers Scarefest. So, in no particular order, we have Subspecies The End Games returning for its 5th year, Altonville Mine Tours Legend of the Skin Snatchers, Project 42, and the Attic Terror of the Towers. Now, I'm going to actually put these into some sort of order. We also had Darkest Depths, may I mention, which replaced the Welcome in the courtyard in Mutiny Bay. So I'm not going to put these into any order of my review of them. I am going to play a brief snippet inside these mazes and what I managed to record. So here is the on-location audio from Subspecies The End Games.
Their hunger is appeased. They leave us in peace. You are now their food and our entertainment. Underworlders, place your bets. You are now part of the game. You will be assigned a number like horses in a race. Underworlders.
Get down, Pete! Get down! Now again, fuck!
So that's the recording that I managed to get of inside of Subspecies The End Games, and now I'm going to sit here and give a little review of the overall experience of Subspecies. Now, if you've watched videos over on our YouTube channel, I was very disappointed to hear that Subspecies was returning this year. only because I didn't really enjoy that maze, and not because I was scared of it or anything like that, because I know what you're thinking. No, it was due to the fact that it was so repetitive, and it feels like some sort of chore as you're experiencing this maze. And do you know what? It was the same again. Nothing much had changed. The actors seemed better than last year. One good thing about this year than last, I didn't seem to confront two actors stood in a chamber talking to each other whilst we was there, which definitely dampened the experience last year, and I think that's why I dislike it so much, because of my experiences that I've had in that attraction in the previous years. It's just not like 2015. Do you know, I think Alton Towers need to now come up with a better maze to replace Subspecies, and that's all I'm going to say about that maze, because I know quite a lot of people think that I slag it off a little bit too much, so I'm not going to sit here and ramble on, because I could actually chew your ears off for quite some time about that maze, because of how poor it is, and you know, it's so repetitive. But what I will say, the actors this year inside there did a fantastic job. You know, they definitely worked their spaces well. So you know, the actors are definitely what make that attraction for me, especially now anyway, because of how repetitive it's getting. But hey-ho, well done to the actors inside that attraction, because they certainly give us a few frights whilst we was in there. So, you know, not too much disappointed with that maze. I'm just ready for that maze to finally close its doors for good, and Alton Towers bring something new and better in its place. Next up is Altonville Mine Tour's Legend of the Skin Snatchers. Now, this was my favourite maze last year, and this year it certainly didn't disappoint, but another maze, which I will mention in a couple of minutes, has knocked Altonville Mine Tours off the top spot for me. So here is some pre-recorded audio from inside Altonville Mine Tours Legend of the Skin Snatchers.
Those of you lucky enough to be given a miner's life, you must wear it at all times. You must not turn it off or remove it until exiting the mines. The use of personal torches, video recording equipment, and photography is strictly forbidden. And one more thing, do not place your hands on the shoulders of the person in front of you. Enjoy the Altonville Mine Tour.
That was just some audio inside Altonville Mine Tours. Now, as you can hear, the audio might not be that great. I'm going to actually sit down and preview it later on. But there's a lot of sounds in there and a lot of interaction. And certainly this year, it didn't disappoint. We still think it's one of our favourites at the resort. And Altonville Mine Tours, I think personally next year, they could completely rechange the ending a little bit. You know, the ending was the same as last year, and I think maybe next year's the time for Altonville Mine Tours to not go fully, but have a complete overhaul in terms of the theming and stuff. I know this year they've added some new additional pieces of theming outside in the queue line, but in the maze it seems like nothing has changed, and I think that maze has practically just stood there for the whole of closed season and the beginning of the Alton Towers Resort season, and then just been kind of turned back on again, if you'd like to say that, in Scarefest. So I don't think anything was changed inside, and that's what I personally noticed, that there was no new changes Apart from the actors, obviously the actors were completely different from what I remember last year. But yet again, the actors were fantastic and certainly did well with giving our group a good fright. I am actually going to say this a few times throughout this podcast that the actors were great, because I feel like this year Alton Towers has, I don't know, I think they've had a look at the recruitment and they've recruited some better actors inside these attractions. And do you know, I think Alton Towers this year have knocked it off the park in terms of the attractions that they've brought to Scarefest this year. So the next maze I'm going to talk about is Project 42, which is located in the former Subterra building in Forbidden Valley. Now, this is the second year running for Project 42, and basically it's a phalanx compound, and basically it's basically like post-apocalyptic kind of thing. You know, there's zombies in there. It's not, you know, necessarily listed as a zombie attraction, but it's definitely based around zombies and some sort of antidote cure that you go in to try and find and stuff like that. So here's some pre-recorded audio of Inside Project 42.
Within the host, turning our test subjects into mindless animals. Now this genome has begun to breed and duplicate, creating one of the most dangerous and infectious conditions known to man. This is where you come in. We're vastly running out of operatives, so it's your job to find the one man who can stop it from within our base. He's the only one who knows how to reverse the effects. I have his photograph.
As you can tell by that pre-recorded audio, Project 42 is very lively. It's a very lively maze with a lot of sound effects, a lot of different smells, and that attraction certainly is one of the better ones this year. It was much better this year than what it was last year when it first debuted on the Scarefest lineup. Now, Project 42 for me was a very good maze. It certainly didn't hit the top spot, but it was definitely up there, shall I say, and it didn't disappoint. We was actually allowed to go in there as a group of 2, so the host on the gate said, how many's in your group? And there was only 4 of us, and they said, would you like to go in as a group of 2? So me and my friend Dan, we went in there on our own, and we had a really good experience. Apart from when an actor decided to grab the back of my head and throw me into the back of Dan's, which nearly resulted in me breaking my cheekbone. That is always a good experience in a scare maze, and I will say, if you don't come out of a scare maze with some sort of without some sort of injury, then is it really a scare maze? You know, I'm seeing a lot of things on Twitter at the minute of some people going in mazes and stuff with getting, like, you know, bruises and stuff inside there. You know, some of these mazes, they said, especially towers now that they can touch you and stuff like that, you certainly do get thrown about a little bit, depending on, you know, who the actor is and if you know them. There's a few actors in a few mazes that we know, but nevertheless, Project 42 definitely delivered a fantastic experience this year. Massive change from last year. Some of the theming has been reduced from last year, albeit it's been replaced with other bits of theming, so I don't really want to give too much away because there's people out there who haven't experienced it, but I'm going to contradict myself and say, so in the middle of Project 42 you used to have the hatched egg, which was also used in Nemesis Subterra, the drop tower ride. That this year had been blocked off by some sort of black wall, so you can't see that anymore, and that space isn't as open as what it was in previous years. I don't know why. I couldn't, to be quite honest with you, last year I could tell that I was in the Subterra building, but this year there were bits and bats that was just really hard to spot, and you couldn't really tell that you was in the Subterra building from the inside. So enough rambling on with Project 42. Now on for Darkest Depths, a new pirate-themed scare maze based in Mutiny Bay, the Courtyard, and it replaced the Welcoming. So this year, it was its first year of Darkest Depths. It was originally listed as a children's maze. Now, well, a young family maze, shall I say. Alton Towers basically listed it as a family maze under the Family Laughs and Fright section of the website. Now, Darkest Depths, for me personally, was not a family maze. How Alton Towers managed to get away with branding that as a family attraction, I would never know, because even I got petrified while I was in that maze. The theming though was fantastic. So here's some pre-recorded audio of Inside Darkest Depths.
Do you know that this here tavern is a secret? On a night very similar to this, the mutiny set sail from this here coast for the last time, full of a crew of pirates on a quest for treasure and an endless supply of. The seas were ferocious that night, but mistakenly reassured by the beautiful tones of the sirens, the mutiny and its seasick crew went deep into the storm.
Kraken is calling!
So, Darkest Depths, you can tell by the audio, it's very much so a pirate-themed attraction. A very well-themed attraction for a shipping container maze. Now, I only realised that it was a shipping container maze because our lovely friends over at Tower Street posted a couple of photos a few weeks prior to Scarefest. Basically, it was all shipping containers. The whole maze was shipping containers. Different to the Welcoming from last year, because the Welcoming was very outside based. It was a much better experience in the dark, but it didn't matter when you wanted to go into Darkest Depths what time of day, because it's a shipping container maze. And it was a fantastic experience. A really well themed maze. We didn't even realise that we was in shipping containers, which is very well done as a maze. It's located in Mutiny Bay, so it fits in with the theming. It was spot on. It was a very good experience, and what I did find out later on the first day of Scarefest, that Alton Towers actually changed the advertised age rating for a 10 plus for Darkest Depths, which is great that the resort realised that they'd poorly marketed it as a 8 plus maze, and then changed it to a 10 plus maze. And I think that was a great idea, because it was very scary. It was a very good experience. I'll give you a little brief description A ghost ship sails into Mutiny Bay this Scarefest, preparing for a voyage to the darkest depths. Climb aboard the Mutiny and set sail for adventures on the high sea. But do not expect the journey to be easy. The ship was crewed by a dastardly band of ghost pirates who would surely like to give you a tour of Davy Jones' locker. Just that is a little snippet of the backstory of Darkest Depths. Very well themed and very well done, Alton Towers, and that become my top maze at Scarefest this year, and that's dubbed as a family maze. I'm sorry, but it was great. It was absolutely fantastic, and it certainly packed a punch. On to the next new maze, which was the reincarnation of Terror of the Towers, which was called the Attic Terror of the Towers. Based in an unseen part of the Alton Towers ruins themselves, the attic was based around some sort of governess who had these like toy dolls, and it was very dark. It was a very dark theme. Before I actually play you the pre-recorded audio, I'll just give you a little description of the attic Terror of the Towers and what the backstory is about, because for some reason I didn't really pay too much of attention to the first scene where the guy gives you a brief overview of what the journey that you're about to undergo. So basically, Terror of the Towers returns for 2019 Scarefest, taking the scares to the next level as guests are invited to explore the attic. As the name suggests, this year the maze will take a new route through the upper floors of the towers to tell a brand new story. Explore the attic and learn the chilling tale of the governess who roams the eaves of the house looking for vengeance after the death of children under her protection. So basically, these children had these dolls and stuff like that, so it's very based around children and children's toys. It's a good attraction, don't get me wrong, it's a very, very good attraction. I do have a little gripe to moan at in a minute, but I'll let you listen to the pre-recorded audio of the Attic Terror of the Towers.
To this day, luring in children to replace those lives lost in her care. The handmade toy still possessed by her tortured soul. Many come to find the truth. Perhaps you can be the ones who can. Stairs.
There you go, that's just a brief audio run through of Terror of the Towers, the Attic. Now, if you want to listen to the full audio walkthrough, head over to our YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/the podcast. Head over to our YouTube channel at www.youtube.com youtube.com/The Loop Podcast to listen to the full live walkthrough of the Attic Terror of the Towers. Now, let's get into the review of the new maze, the Attic. Now, we first experienced the Attic at about 1:15 on the 5th, which was the first day of Scarefest, and I'm going to be honest, we had a shocking experience. It was poor. Very, very, very poor. Now, we was batched in a group of 10. Don't get me wrong, when we first walked in, we was like, wow, this looks so good. An indoor queue line, nice music, and was batched in a group of 10. And then, about a few minutes later, we managed to catch up with the group in front of us. Now, that wasn't due to us actually running through the maze. It was because the actors inside seemed to like to take the time with the groups that come through. That's not a bad thing, because, you know, you want to get your money's worth in these attractions. But what seemed to happen was we was batched in a group of 10, and we finished that maze in a group of 20. So we got no scares at the first experience of the Attic. Now, I actually went back and went to the box office, and I didn't complain as such. I went and spoke to a lovely gentleman called Zach. He basically said, so what was the problem? And I said, well, basically, we've had quite possibly the worst run-through of a maze that we've ever experienced. It was so rushed. We didn't get any scares. We managed to catch on with the group in front of us, and it just ruined the overall experience. And the guy turned around and said, that's not good. Basically, then he went and said, how many was in your group? I said 10. He went and printed us off 10 new tickets for the Attic at a later time. So then we went back to the attraction at around 8 o'clock that evening. You know, we let the actors bed in a little bit. It was the first day, so it was understandable, and it turned out to be quite a good experience. Certainly not the best maze that I've been through, but not the worst. And it certainly made up for the poor experience that we got the first time around. And then the next day we experienced it again, and I experienced it twice the next day. So in total I went through the Attic 4 times, and it actually become a really, really good maze. It was very well themed. I loved the dark corridor with the orange spotlight and the heat. The heat in that room was unbearable. It was actually really hot. And the actors inside there was very, very good. The smells were great. A big shout out to Aroma Prime, who do all the scents at Alton Towers and make these attractions smell really good and really, really nasty. And hopefully at some point we're in talks with getting Aroma Prime onto the podcast to drop them an interview to see basically what they're all about and how they started their company. So, to summarise, the Attic turned out to be a very, very good experience for us, and we certainly loved that maze. So that's basically all the scare maze covered. You know, so I've Subspecies, Altonville Mine Tours, Project 42, the Attic, and Darkest Depths. That's plenty to keep yourselves occupied whilst visiting at Scarefest. Just a quick one, we also have the Alton Ancestors, the street team, who are fantastic, who do the flash mobs on Tower Street in various different locations throughout the day around the park. We also have a bit of a ramped up version of the Alton Towers dungeons, but unfortunately we didn't get a chance to experience them on the day, as we was kind of busy with doing all the main attractions that was on the lineup, and I actually wanted to do the main attractions multiple times so that I could sit here and give you guys a proper review of the whole experience that we had. I'm also going to include a few other clips that I recorded throughout the day at Scarefest, along with where I rank these individual mazes in terms of best to worst. So it's now time to put the mazes in some sort of a list order of my favourite to the worst, and I'm actually going to start off down at number 4. So at number 4 we have Subspecies The End Games. No surprise there. Bit of a poor experience in my eyes. I didn't enjoy it. Nothing to do with the actors or anything like that. It was just a poor overall experience, and I can't wait to see what Alton Towers has in store for us next year on the lineup. Now it's time to actually put the mazes into some sort of ranking order from worst to good. Now, at the bottom of that pile, at number 5, unfortunately, it is Subspecies The End Games. No surprise. No disrespect to the actors inside that maze, who are phenomenal, or, you know, the guys who have put the time and effort to put that maze back together, but it certainly disappointed me this year that it returned on the lineup. I'm not going to sit here and slag it off anymore. It's at number 5. Number 3 is, it was really difficult to decide between Project 42 and Altonville Mine Tours, because the standard was very, very high this year in terms of mazes. But unfortunately, Project 42, even though we had one of the best run-throughs of a maze that I've been in, sits at number 4. Third on that list is Altonville Mine Tours Legend of the Skin Snatchers. Now, this is actually a massive statement to say it was my favourite maze last year, and this year it's now my 3rd favourite. Second on the bill is the Attic Terror of the Towers. Yet we had a really poor run through the first attempt, but it was definitely redeemed on the final go that we experienced on. It was very good. We managed to go through as a group of 3, and it was a really good experience. The Attic, thumbs up. But at the top spot, it is Darkest Depths, and that alone is worth travelling up to the Staffordshire theme park for. Darkest Depths was fantastic, and we certainly enjoyed our experiences through that maze. So to summarise, this year Alton Towers Scarefest was fantastic. They've put on a really, really, really good show, and it's definitely bang for the buck money. You do get your money's worth within these attractions. Now, I am understanding that these mazes do differ in terms of experiences. You know, it's very hard to keep a maze more consistent because it's different. We're all human, you know, people make mistakes or things go wrong whilst you're inside, but, you know, nevertheless, Scarefest this year was fantastic, and it is only the beginning, and I'm looking forward to going back in a couple of weeks to see what's changed throughout the resort. I will say Scarefest is running furthermore from the 12th to the 13th, and then it has a break, and then it runs all the way through from the 18th of October to the 3rd of November. Now, I am going to give some negatives about Scarefest this year and what I think the resort was lacking. So, even though it didn't disappoint, we still think it's a strong event. But the one thing it's missing is scare zones. Now, if many of you have visited in previous years, we've had the Freak Show scare zone, which it was like a clown-based walkthrough. We've had Zombie Scare Zone, and we've had the Scary Tales, which was, I think it was based on, you know, like Little Red Riding Hood and different types of mythical characters, and that was very good. So that's the one thing it's missing. It's missing scare zones, and definitely even more use of roaming actors, because I know last year, even though Freak Show scare zone wasn't a thing, as my iPad in the background goes off, even though Freak Show wasn't there last year, they still had some of the cast from the Freak Show roaming around near the towers and had more roaming actors, even though this year you've only got the roaming actors of the Alton ancestors. And just at the Skyride station near Tower Street, you've got some singing ghosts that definitely look phenomenal. So to summarise, Alton Towers Scarefest this year was definitely a set the bar high in terms of previous years, and we can't wait to go back again. So if you visited Scarefest, we'd like to know your opinions and reviews based upon your experiences there. Drop us a message on Twitter at www.twitter.com/podcast_loop, and maybe you guys can come on the podcast and give your reviews, and we can sit down and have a talk about the 2019 event Scarefest. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. I'm very sorry for the lack of on-location recording. I hope you can understand I did lose my microphone, and I was very disappointed, and I didn't want to use the potato recording microphone that is on the iPhone. So thank you very much for listening, and I will see you in the next podcast episode.